Good afternoon and welcome to this week's GEMA VIEW Virtual Industry Talk focused on agencies. These weekly virtual talks are sponsored by the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance and the Colley Career Center. Thank you for taking time out of your day to connect virtually with fellow Hoyas for this industry-specific discussion. I'm Justin Spence, Associate Director of Regional Alliances at Georgetown, and I'll be facilitating today's virtual talk. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. As you can see, this is being held via Zoom meeting and each participant has been muted upon entry. Please keep yourselves muted during the panel discussion to cut down on any background noise and disruptions. The panelists will take questions at the end of the discussion, and please send your questions in as you have them during the discussion as well via the chat function below. If you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please submit those concerns to me via the chat function using the control panel. Without any further ado, I'm pleased to turn things over to Kara Klontz.
Hey everybody, and thank you, Justin. I'm Kara, and I'll be our moderator for today's discussion on the agencies. I work with GEMA's LA chapter, and we're so pleased to have four incredible panelists with us today. We have Ryan Wackerman, who is an agent at ICM, Eliza Wheeler, who's an executive assistant at Gersh, Jamieson Baker, who is a former talent manager, and Francis McDonough, who is an assistant at UTA. And I want to start things off by hearing about each of your backgrounds, but before we do, I can tell you all a little bit more about mine. I graduated from Georgetown in 2016 and got my first job directly as a result from the GEMA externship, and I've been participating in GEMA ever since. I started off my career at Sports Illustrated, where I worked on the video team and editorial side for 2 years before joining UTA. And I started off at UTA as an assistant and now work as a coordinator in our corporate consulting division known as UTA Marketing. And I've actually been lucky enough to get to know Fran at UTA as we work together. So Fran, I'll turn it over to you. Tell us more about your background and how you ended up at UTA.
Okay, it's a bit of a long run, but I'll try and shorten it for everybody. So graduated 2013 from Georgetown Business School, student athlete there. Double majored in finance and marketing, and then went right into finance as a lot of people do out of business school, and started at Cambridge Gerald, mostly dealing with credit default swaps, credit derivatives in the distressed and high yield area, which was a fantastic time because you had your corporate card and unlimited spending account, which was great as a 23-year-old in New York, and then realized that it wasn't really a long-term career path, and kind of weaseled my way into this company called Duff & Phelps, where I was on the corporate finance team and worked on restructuring and bankruptcy, corporate bankruptcy consulting, which was the worst 3 years of my life. And it was 110 hours a week. It was pretty intense, but learned a lot. And it helped me, obviously in my later career. And it helped me focus on what I wanted to do, which was get into entertainment. And I had a couple clients out in California that I would constantly visit, every couple of months, and I would parlay that into interviewing for, different people within the entertainment industry, because I didn't know anybody. And Rich Batista helped me connect with a bunch of Georgetown alums out here. They got me connected with UTA, WME, CAA, ICM, and over the last few months of 2018, I was interviewing and ended up getting a few offers. One was at UTA, but I had to get through one more stage, and I decided to become an intern because I had to wait on a couple of other offers, and it just I didn't want to wait for UTA to drop me, so decided to become an intern at UTA, and that was 2019. And then 2 months of being an intern, then became a full-time employee, and then started working for a talent agent, and then became recently promoted to a partner on the talent desk. But that's a very short snippet of the career path, but obviously we could talk about other questions later, but that's kind of like just the linear path of me.
Awesome. And yes, we will dive in. I'd love to know exactly what each of your roles looks like, so we'll get to that next. But Ryan, how about you? Want to tell us about your path from Georgetown?
Sure. I was psych and bio, or psych major, bio minor, pre-med, did all the MCATs and got into med school and realized I always sort of knew I didn't want to go. At the same time, I loved entertainment, and I was doing improv at Georgetown and plays and film festivals. And I moved, when I made the decision to go for the thing that I wanted to do and not the thing that I thought I could control, I figured I should move to Los Angeles and try to figure it out. At that point, my resume pretty much supported a healthcare career, so I got a job at a per diem nurse staffing agency, which is the business side of healthcare. And when, after about 3 years, I had saved enough money, I took a leap of faith and took an unpaid internship I found on Craigslist at a very small production company. And I did that for about 3 months. And the goal of that was to kind of learn the who's who in the lexicon of the business and start making some connections. And that led to a paid assistant position at Kaplan Stoller, which is a small boutique agency, mostly in the TV lit business, but I was in a fledgling reality TV group. I thought that I wanted to get out of reality and into scripted comedy, but the more I worked at the agency, I saw how much fun everyone was having in reality and how miserable my colleagues were in scripted, and I just stayed on the course. And my boss at the time moved to ICM. He was an agent and recruited over to ICM and brought me with him. And I worked my way up there from his desk to the head of the department's desk to the agency coordinator for all the international television business. And then I've been doing that for 6 years or so as an agent.
Awesome. Eliza, how about you?
Like Ryan, I studied psychology, but minored in cognitive science and art history. And I sort of loved knowing how the brain worked, but wasn't much of a lab coat person. So I sort of dug deep into my other hobbies and found that I've always been addicted to television, from like watching reruns of Bewitched to every episode of Gilmore Girls. It was just what I loved. And so I started taking internships in LA every summer, worked at a post-production company, worked at a physical production company, and kind of wanted to peek behind the curtain. So I ended up interning at William Morris, which is sort of one of the big two when it comes to agencies, and absolutely fell in love with it. My dad was like, if you want to deliver mail, UPS will pay you more. And I was like, you really don't get what I'm doing here. So left Georgetown, knew I wanted to be in an agency, but at William Morris, it was just so big that there's not much room for promotion. And at that point, I wanted to be an agent, and I wanted to be somewhere small where I knew that there were less people trying to climb the ladder. So I kind of did what Francis did and looked at UTA and ICM and William Morris and CAA and Gersh, and I ended up landing at Gersh. It's the last family-owned agency, and going into their TV lit department, and have been there for about 1.5 years now.
Great. And Jamieson, last but not least.
Hello. So I was SFS. I graduated in 2008 and was a culture and politics major. And I was also really involved in student theater, and kind of, found myself at the end of my Georgetown career really wanting to pursue something creative and something in entertainment. And I was a GEMA extern my senior year. So I went out to LA for my spring break week and did a week of general meetings with alums. And that was, I think, really the experience that inspired me to move to LA after graduation, which I did. And my resume was also pretty thin coming out of Georgetown as far as entertainment goes. So I took a couple unpaid internships. I interned for a few different film producers and literally sat in their offices on studio lots and read scripts and wrote script coverage all day, which is basically a book report. So after doing that and getting a little bit more experience and kind of a little bit better understanding of how the industry worked, I bit the bullet and also went to work in a mailroom in one of the agencies. I worked at WME and ended up working for two pretty high profile talent agents, motion picture talent agents, and really enjoyed the work. But well, I didn't enjoy the work. I enjoyed the the information that I got at work. But I knew I didn't want to be an agent after about a year and a half. It wasn't for me. I moved to New York and I worked in film production. I worked for a few different film producers and worked on mostly independent films. And through one of those films, I met an actor whose manager was looking for an assistant in New York. And at that point, I was looking to get out of indie film because it was really unstable. The company that I worked for lost its overhead deal, and my bosses told me they weren't sure how they were going to pay me. So I knew I needed to find something else. And I ended up taking a job at a company called Untitled Entertainment, which is a bi-coastal management company, and worked there for the last 6 years. Ended up getting promoted to manager after about a year working there. So I was a manager for the last 5 years, representing actors and filmmakers and sort of working on kind of all different facets of their career. So film, television, endorsements. It was a much kind of broader scope of work than what I had done at the agency, which was more specialized. And I just left that job in June because I've started writing my own script and I'm following my passion and putting together a feature film that I've written and I'm going to direct. So that's the very latest in my story, but excited to be here and to tell you more about my experience in the agency world.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And before we dive into kind of what your day-to-days look like and your experience in your specific roles, I'd love to understand how you viewed agencies when you were at Georgetown. What was your understanding of them? Did you know about them? Did everything you know about them come from Entourage? I'd love to know like how you viewed that career path just in general. So Fran, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I had a very thin understanding of the agencies coming out of Georgetown because finance was life from the business school. That was all you knew. So the idea of it was there. I had friends who were already starting, right out of college, not in Georgetown, but friends of friends. And that's really the way that I heard about it. And it wasn't until till I was 25 when, who's now one of my closest friends out here. Her name is Kitty Giarla, and she works at Endeavor Content. And we would always talk about movies and film, and we'd always go to movies, and we'd have very in-depth conversation about this. And she was like, you should just, and she knew I hated, my job, and she was always like, you should just go and interview, and that's kind of how I started understanding more about the agencies. And then on just a high level of how I looked at it, you have the top four, TAA, WME, UTA, ICM. And then how I looked at it was, how are they built financially? Who owns the company? And CAA and WME sold the majority of their percentage or their stake to private equity firms. And so how I looked at it was, okay, meritocracy is probably not as great over there because of how they're controlled by private equity. And then I looked at UTA and ICM and UTA were kind of the perfect fit in terms of financially, cultural, meritocracy. And that's kind of how I made my decision.
Awesome. And Ryan, how about you? I mean, pre-med, med school. When did agencies come into the picture for you?
Maybe the day I started at one. I thought of myself, I didn't think of myself as a creative person, but I'd always creative side of it, performing in improv or plays or whatever. And I didn't really see myself as a career entertainer. I didn't think the lifestyle was for me, the rejection and long hours and travel and just candidly, I don't want to be famous. It sounded miserable, but I, had been in the business side of healthcare, and when I thought I would, find my way into the creative, my first internship, really started pushing me towards the business side of the business, and was very supportive and helped open my eyes to what the job is, and probably a lot of it was Entourage was the only real introduction I had to that there was an agency business. But when I showed up and I learned how the role of an agent is sourcing opportunity for clients and protecting their interests, and all through, the idea of growing their creative careers. And so while not being creative, I realized you have to be creatively literate. You have to have some taste. You have to understand maybe where people, what might have more commercial value versus something else, or artistic value, or, and when I got in there and I saw how entrepreneurial you could be and how you could manage your own schedules and your own client list, and and try to do that within the bigger playground of an agency. I realized it worked for what I was good at, and I do like arguing with people a little bit, and I especially like being right. So that's kind of the job of an agent.
For sure. And Eliza, how about you? I mean, you early on were at a talent agency, but was that something that was on your radar at Georgetown?
So I actually transferred to Georgetown my sophomore year, and that's when I kind of started getting into television and looking at internships and that. I took, as a shout out to Professor Kelly Cole, if there are any current students, her Television and American Society class is incredible, and really had a few classes on the business of TV. And that's where I was like, okay, what's this agency thing? And she goes back to like Fairbanks starting an agency and actors really getting into it. And when I was working in editing and physical production, everyone just kept telling me, you have to go to an agency. It's the grad school of entertainment. And I think it isn't a surprise to those of us who work in it. You're paid zero as a mailroom person. But with the idea of it being a grad school, you're like, well, most people aren't paid to go to grad school. So I guess some money is better than none. And then starting at William Morris, I definitely was sort of slapped in the face with the reality of the agency world. You get there and you're like, I literally am delivering mail. There's nothing more to it. And you realize there's so much information that gets diffused into you. It's a lot more than what you're actually just walking around and doing. And that was kind of my eye opener.
Definitely. Yeah. It's an interesting balance of, while one hand menial tasks, but then at the other side, absorbing so much information and building such a greater understanding of what the entertainment industry looks like when you first start off at an agency. And last but not least, Jamieson, how about you? You were, it sounds like, more familiar with the creative world at Georgetown, but were the agency and the representation of talent, is that a career that you had really thought about?
It's funny. I was just thinking when you first asked the question, I think, my first ideas about agents really kind of came from actor friends of mine, when we were students and they were thinking about their acting careers after school and thinking, how do I get an agent? But it really wasn't until I think I went on that externship, that GEMA externship, that I started to seriously think about working as an agent or at an agency. And it's funny you mentioned Entourage. That absolutely shaped my perception of agencies. I don't know if, it might be a little bit ancient history at this point for some of you listening in, but at the time, Jeremy Piven and Ari Gold, that was a huge, larger than life kind of hothead talent agent character that was supposedly based on Ari Emanuel, who's the real life CEO of WME. And so that figure kind of very much loomed large in my perception of what agents were and what they were like. And I remember when I was on the GEMA externship, almost everybody I met who was a recent graduate had started in a mailroom at an agency. And they all said the same thing, which was that it's terrible, it's a horrible experience, but you have to do it for a year as an entry-level job if you want to go on and do anything else in this business. And, they all said it was horrible because the pay was so low and the work was so menial, and people were really mean to you. Your bosses, the agents, would yell and scream and call you names, and you would be, staying in the office late, sort of rolling calls, which is an agency term for, dialing the phone, and scheduling meetings. And basically, it was a miserable, sort of thankless job for very little money, but also sort of kind of the only trial by fire way to get into the business. And so, so I think as a result of hearing all those stories, I really put off starting in the mailroom. I kind of tried to shortcut or bypass that by doing these development internships, and reading the scripts for the producers and sort of hoping that one of them would hire me as their assistant and I wouldn't have to kind of go through the agency process. But but eventually I sort of wasn't getting hired, and realized it was because this year as an agency assistant, or, you know, mailroom attendant turned agency assistant, really was sort of the gold standard entry level experience in order to move up. So that's how I ended up at the agency after sort of a couple of years of trying not to.
And it's interesting to hear you say that, because I definitely think that still holds true today. So many of the job opportunities, the entry-level job opportunities that come across our desks on a day-to-day basis, are only open to applicants who have 1 year experience at a talent agency. And it's just, I think it's still sort of just a hard truth of breaking into this business. And, you know, I always recommend going to talent agencies, especially if you're not sure exactly what career you're interested in entertainment, just because, like, being in the mailroom and working as a trainee for that 1 year exposes you to so many sides of the business. And I hear of people all the time who are not entirely sure what they want to do, maybe want to work in TV lit or talent, and then end up in like esports or digital, and like through that year that they spent absorbing everything and learning about talent agencies, find this career path that they really didn't know existed before. But I'd love to hear about the day-to-day. And I know it's hard to describe day-to-day. I think especially working at an agency, every day is different. But as best you can, give me a quick day-to-day of what your job looks like. And Eliza, let's start with you.
I'm just unmuting myself there. So I work in the TV Lit department. I'm currently working for a partner in the department as well as a senior agent in the department. So things are really crazy. And on an average day, I'm sitting in on practice pitches with our clients who are taking out a show they want to be made or they're attached to. And then I'm setting formal pitches for them with production companies. Right now, we're big in the international space, so I'm working on some O1 visas at the moment, funny enough. I'm reading scripts, editing them for our new clients, making sure it all grammatically, spelling, weird scene changes. With those international clients, I get a lot of scripts where I have to change slang. So we have a British writer who's like, I don't think this is a word in America, but I don't want to confuse people. As Jamieson said, I'm rolling calls for my boss, not so much now due to COVID, but they give you a big list, get all these people for me, and you're just dialing as fast as you can to get through the list. Because we're big in the international space, I'm doing a lot of film festival planning back in the day, client relations, setting meetings. But I'd say maybe my favorite part of it is I'm reading all these scripts and I really get to follow these projects. So like right now we have a writer who had a pilot he was really passionate about when I started about 1.5 years ago, and it comes out on Hulu at the end of the year. So being able to like watch that, see it get pitched, see it sold, and sort of cross our fingers it gets picked up. And that's one of my favorite parts, is like you read the script and you're so excited about it, and you know the person that wrote it, and then you get to, I'm psyched to be able to stream it. So that's probably my favorite part of the day-to-day.
Awesome. And Jamieson, you next. What did your life look like up to June? And now, like, what does your job look like the last month or so?
Well, let's see. So as a manager at Untitled, management is a little bit different than agency work. And I can go into that a little bit further, but you know, for now, I guess just talking about day-to-day as a manager, you know, it really does vary. I think agency life is a little bit more structured, and also, you know, agencies tend to be larger and sort of more, a little bit just kind of hierarchical and also specified in terms of the work. But, you know, as a manager, like I said, I was kind of involved in all sort of different facets of my clients' sort of day-to-day, and also, you know, their careers, but also sometimes their personal lives. So I worked with about 25 clients, and my day would really vary. It honestly would vary quite a bit, but it was a combination of sort of pushing new opportunities forward and trying to source new opportunities, and at the same time, you know, kind of managing opportunities that were already in the works or, you know, active jobs. And then also, you know, just kind of a lot of sort of alternating between following up and keeping things on track, and then being proactive and kind of thinking outside the box and creating new opportunities. So, I mean, some days I was in the office, some days I was traveling. It's a lot over email these days. I think when I started out at the agency, when I was an assistant, there was a lot more business done over the phone. Now it seems that, just kind of a lot's done on email. I still think there's certain things that are better done on the phone, but a lot of emails, and I don't know. I mean, it was all different. I can also talk about my day-to-day as an agency assistant, although it sounds like some of you maybe have probably more current experiences of that than I do. So maybe I'll leave it to you.
Well, speaking of which, that's a great transition. Fran, tell us about your life right now. Tell us about life when we were in the agency, in the building. And
we could go pre-COVID and post-COVID, or during COVID.
Yeah.
So how do I do? Okay, right now, how I would describe it is like you're in I have two bosses right now because we furloughed a large part of our assistants, and so we've taken on a new boss. And how I would describe it, don't get freaked out. It's just the way I describe it is like I'm in a boxing ring, and I have a heavyweight boxer and Manny Pacquiao both fighting you at the same time. But it's so like what Ryan was saying is, look, you go through contentious arguments, and if you're not comfortable with going through contentious arguments, maybe this isn't the right job for you, but it does train you into how to formulate ways to speak. So you're constantly learning how to speak and how to articulate ways of talking to your boss, talking to producers, talking to casting directors, and you're constantly on the phone. You're constantly trying to find opportunities for your boss's clients. And it's a very fundamental job. Look, the job is not that hard being an assistant. It's answering emails, sending out avail checks, meaning, casting directors will have a project where they send out dates for a certain project, and you tell them if your client is available or not. And then you're answering emails, phones, and then dealing with your boss. It's a relationship. You're emotionally invested in their business and them. So, day to day, it obviously changes, but you constantly have to be on point. And you're constantly reading and trying to find new opportunities for your boss's clients. So you're reading everything. Like, your boss can't read everything, right? So how you add value is to read everything that's that's actively casting right now, and then bringing them ideas. And then two, going out and going on, there's this website called The Blacklist where there's unencumbered scripts that you can read, that you could bring to your boss and see, trust your taste, obviously, what Jamieson was saying, trust your taste, and bring that into your boss and pitch them in an articulate way. So again, fundamental, dealing with your boss's emotions, and then trying to find projects and scripts I think that's the best way. Pre-COVID, I had one boss, and it was I would say it was more hyper intensive because you were in the office, but you were around all the other assistants, which is great. So being it was a totally different feel. But yeah, I would say those are the three things. Bringing in projects, making sure that you're articulate with your bosses, because they, my current boss is, was a lawyer at the time, and she is unbelievable at arguing. So, yeah. So those are all. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan, does that kind of?
Yeah, Ryan. So what's the life of an agent?
Grammar sometimes really terrible. It's I tell a lot of my assistants, and I still feel like I wasn't an assistant that long ago. But it's 5 C's of importance in no order: clients and colleagues, communication, cash, and calendar. And it's balancing the proactive and the reactive parts of your job. So, as I mentioned and has been discussed, the kind of an agency is to source work and grow clients' careers. And so you have to, you may want to pitch your client for a specific project or pitch your client's idea. And that involves, either sending emails or making phone calls or showing up in office buildings to walk through ideas, or connecting people on to themselves for a particular show, or project or whatever it is. And you need to go into your day with your list of people who are available or ideas that are ready to be pitched. And, it hits you in the face, and you may be putting out a fire that you weren't ready for. And, using an old medical term from my pre-med days, triage. And it's all about, looking at, is this email that just came in, is the call that just came in, does it bump things down the priority list, or does this just go somewhere in the middle or at the bottom? Or, will I ever care about this crazy person who has an idea for, Trump versus Obama boxing match? That you try to, maintain some semblance of order in your day, and balance too. I mean, I'm married with a kid, and I like I'm talking largely in pre-COVID days where you'd show up to meetings, but in the same way, you're scheduling Zooms and phone calls and connecting people. And the agency business doesn't really require a lot of in-person services. I mean, it's an extra touch, and I certainly enjoyed the, expense account business lunches and dinners and such, but the main part of the job is sort of connecting people who did and taking some money off the top when they start doing business together. And so that can be done anywhere with a telephone or smartphone and access to email. And yeah, it's just, the nice thing about it being an agency is that the day-to-day is largely in your control. And if there's something that's important that's going on in my family with a doctor's appointment or a school play or anything like that, I have the ability to schedule around it. And and if I want to take a vacation, and unfortunately, a lot of times the job follows you to some degree. I share most agents. We work on teams, help people just for, added value and voice and availability, really, because if you take a vacation, and someone's livelihood is dependent on your ability to respond to an open job or negotiate their deal, and you can't be responsive, you're not just costing, yourself some opportunity. I mean, you're costing somebody who has a family an opportunity. So there's a lot of on-call stuff, but you can, again, triage and look if someone sends you a new idea that they want to pitch and there's urgency to them. If you need to take a week for yourself, that's, I think a lot of the job, and I think probably many of us are struggling with it now in all different, facets, is finding the balance, because, the demarcation between I'm at work and now I'm at home is gone. So it's, trying to find the time that, you have to be responsive, and then a time that you decide that you have value as a human.
For sure. I think a lot of working in entertainment in general is just balance, because, it can be an overwhelming job. And I completely agree. It is a job that follows you. We are, at least UTA is great about allowing you to take time off. But even when we take time off, I mean, I'm never not checking my emails and following along and seeing if anything is urgent. And of course, our team members are great about stepping in, but it is definitely, it's sort of the type of career where you're heavily invested in, you're sort of always on. But taking a step back, I'd love to hear from you guys on your advice for students and or recent graduates, especially amidst COVID, who would like to break into the industry and are dealing with hiring freezes across the board. What is your advice in terms of breaking into an agency at this moment? And Eliza, let's start with you.
It's definitely tricky. As Francis said, I think it's true for all agencies. There's been heavy furloughing. And I know, at least for Gersh, what that means is if an opportunity opens, they have to legally offer it to the people they furloughed before bringing in new people, which I'm sorry sounds scary, but a lot of the time it's not that you aren't a great applicant, it's that they're legally obligated to offer it to the people they've let go. And so what I've been telling a lot of people is just use this time to go crazy with informational interviews. I know I've gotten some LinkedIn DMs and jumped on phones with people. I'm proud to say I've gotten 2 Georgetown alumni hired at Gersh. So we try. There's not much more I can do other than send your resume to our HR and cross my fingers with you, but definitely there. I know when I was at Georgetown, I sort of went on LinkedIn and clicked the industry, entertainment, and college Georgetown and just hit up everyone that popped up. And I think, as you were saying, an agency is really a great place to figure out where you want to go in entertainment. And so I'd use this opportunity to sort of do informational interviews, try to figure that out. Francis mentioned the blacklist, read scripts if that's what you're interested in, sort of develop your taste. When you get to an agency and you get out of the mailroom or even are in the mailroom, I'd have agents ask me, like, what's your favorite script you've ever read? What's your favorite show you've seen? And those conversations are invaluable to getting to know the business, making connections, and then getting on a desk. My boss asks me every day, this is a potential client, read the script, let me know what you think. He's a 36-year-old from Jersey. I'm a 24-year-old from San Francisco. He wants to know sort of what their audience is, what people want now, what he wants, etc. So I'm sorry, I can't imagine the frustration. I had a delay in starting my career when I graduated, and it drove me a little insane. So I feel for you, and I think it's just a great time to research. Also, COVID right now kind of feels I have more free time than I've ever had, and I know everyone told me this and I didn't believe it. Enjoy it while it lasts. I'm always on, I'm always working. I was on my emails at midnight last night and got back on them at 7:30 this morning. So if you have time to binge a show, see it as research and binge it, because what I would do.
That's funny to hear you say that, and I can definitely attest. I mean, when you get to an agency and you're interviewing, they want to know that you're passionate about entertainment and that you consume content in some form, whether it's esports or film. So I hear you taking the time to study the industry and do your homework. And if that means watching classic films, then watch classic films and be able to talk about who the director is and his work and his impression on the film. Jamieson, and I guess actually after you, I'll just open it up. If Fran or Ryan, do you guys have any words of wisdom for students or recent grads who would like to break in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what both of you said. I do think it's really important to use this time, if you're at home or you have some downtime, to both develop your point of view around sort of film, TV, creative material, whichever facet of the business is most interesting to you. But also, on the other hand, just develop your knowledge of the industry and also what's kind of current in the industry. I think, you can really log into any of the industry trade websites for free and read news on Deadline, Hollywood, and Variety, and The Reporter. Like, start with the 3 of those and just get a sense of what's going on right now, with the WGA and sort of settling their agreements with the agencies. Like, this is all very much on the minds of everybody working in the agency world. And so, when it does get to the point where you have an opportunity to interview or meet somebody, I think you'll be that much more impressive if you're able to speak intelligently about that. The other thing I'll say is, in my experience, entry-level jobs at the agencies have always been by personal referral only. And so in that sense, I don't think, anybody is necessarily at a bigger disadvantage right now than they would be if we weren't all at home. I think networking has always been of paramount importance in terms of getting your foot in the door in the mailroom of the agencies. And so, like Eliza was talking about, network, and, that's sort of trite, and I know you hear it all the time, but GEMA is a great resource. I also think there's sort of a general Georgetown alumni website that you can log into and search. And people may even have the option to sort of kind of declare their willingness to speak to alums about their careers. So explore that. And also, don't limit it just to school and Georgetown. I think, if you've had internships, certainly follow up and maintain those relationships, both with your supervisors, but also with your fellow interns. And you really never know where an opening is going to come from. I think if you have the ability to sort of intern or volunteer, sort of help somebody out while you're at home, definitely do that. And, even if it's not necessarily the exact sort of area of the industry where you want to be in, even if it's not at an agency, You never know where somebody else's relationship will lead. So I think just kind of be open to opportunities and be open to kind of receiving mentorship and be open to other people being willing to help you, because that's been really invaluable for me.
Yeah, I right, like consume content. If you want to eventually be a writer, be an actor, be a director, create content, learn, besides the main trades of Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, and Variety, and sign up for Synopsis. That's CYNOPSIS, which is a daily email that runs through pretty much the headlines of the day before. And if you find something that interests you, go down the rabbit hole, learn the corporate structures of the studios, and figure out who's reporting to who, and when, so when your boss tells you to call someone, or you didn't even know that your, someone who's a VP of communications is really reports directly to the, the person who can get you in at a development phase and might have that relationship, like being able to kind of connect those dots and see how the structures of the different companies are built. And by the way, and they're changing, like what's, the WGA ATA thing has been probably the #1 news story from agency's point of view for a while. But right now, I mean, NBC Universal, Warner Media, they are drastically restructuring their corporate creatives because of largely reactionary to Netflix and how they're getting their butts kicked and losing, and so these kind of late additions to the streaming wars, and just generally reading up on this, on the business side of it, because it does form, I mean, this is its own ecosystem where there are viewers of all sorts, but many broadcast networks have, different targets, and certainly the cable networks are even, more focused. So it's learning, if you're creating something or you want something, who is it for? I mean, that's sort of the next step of, once you have information, then, what can you do with it? That's kind of the main part of an agency, is learning how to control the flow of information. So.
Okay. So the one thing I want to first say is that you have all the time in the world. You have all the time in the world. I know that the climate of what's going on right now with COVID and a hiring freeze sucks, but you have all the time in the world. So in your 20s, what I really think that you should really think about is, 1, building a network, and 2, building a skill. Now, if you don't get your first job in a talent agency or a management company or a production company or a studio or anything like that, do not freak out about that. I started when I was 29. I moved over when I was 29 years old. But before that, I was learning skills. So I'm not saying that you should just go after entertainment immediately. Go for jobs that are open right now. Go for jobs that teach you skills. And then in the meantime, do everything that what everyone else is saying. Look at Deadline, read scripts. What I would do is I would pick 3 movies, 3 TV shows, 3 actors, 3 directors, 3 producers, and know them by heart, in depth, of what they do and what they've done and what they're about to do. So when you do have these conversations with people, networking, you don't waste a bullet. And I would speak to at least 1 to 2 people a week, or try to do that, and build up that network that way. Like what Eliza was saying, we in every agency, we're on a hiring freeze because we furlough 50% of our assistants, which means that when that time comes that we will bring people back, we can only bring back the people that we furloughed first. Now, I'm not going to give you a timeline of when that's going to happen, but this is the reality of it. But that's not a big deal. Like I'm saying, you have all the time in the world. So if that means picking a job right now to get out of your house, to get out of your parents' house, to start your life in another career, do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But make sure that you pick a job that builds skills, or that's something that's transferable into the talent agency world. because I do agree, starting at a talent agency is very important because that's where all the information is, and that's where you want to be, where all the information flow comes in, right? So if that means taking a year or two break and doing something else, then do that. That's what I would do, because right now we are in the world where finance was in 2008, where nobody was hiring. So that is something that you need to wrap your minds around right now. And it sucks to hear, but it is just important to understand that. But that doesn't mean that jobs aren't opening up. But that's what I would do. Build a network, talk to as many people as you can. Do not waste a bullet. Make sure you know exactly what you want to do when you're talking to people, because we have so many other things going on. We don't want to waste our time, and you don't want to waste your time. And you also want to be coming out of these conversations saying, or us going, okay, so-and-so knows what he or she wants to do. I know exactly who to put them in touch with. So that's, I think, that's what I would do if I were in your situation. But again, you have all the time in the world, all the time in the world. Do not fear it.
It's interesting hearing you say, take another opportunity just to build skills. And if you guys are wondering, at least I think important skills to build are interpersonal skills. If you're going to go to an agency, you have to be good with people. You're working with people day in and day out, and the people you're representing, are humans. So I think any role that is client facing, I think will give you invaluable skills that you can transfer into an agency role. And also any role that is high volume, where you're getting a lot of emails and calls a day, doesn't matter what those emails and calls are about, but just getting experience fielding lots of incoming material, I think is a great skill that you can speak to in an interview, saying, hey, I was in a really high volume, role at X company where I was dealing with, 600 emails a day and, 10 phone calls an hour, whatever. That is true stuff that you can use to help you get a role at an agency. So I guess it sounds like there's a couple people on here. Thank you guys for sending through questions. For the folks who might want to work on the other side of the business and, be more of a content creator that, sells work to talent agents. I've got a question. Since talent agencies are famous for not taking unsolicited inquiries, like we can't take a random script. How would you recommend kind of breaking in and pitching material to an agent? I open up that to the four of you, whoever wants to take it.
Start on the ground floor. I mean, if I, no agencies don't sign people out of college who, they're not going to sign a Steven Spielberg who's gifted and has no track record. You have to look for PA jobs, assistant jobs. Most writers I know personally have started at an agency. They worked in the TV lit department. They, honed their own craft by reading a lot of other people's scripts, worked ingratiated themselves to their agent's client list, found somebody whose voice they responded to well, and became their assistant when there was a need. And from that assistant, they, speak up a little bit more day by day and work their way into a writer's room, and then work your way up a writer's room. I mean, if you want to be a director, you're on set and you're bringing coffee and you're doing that perfectly. And if you screw up, and you will be surprised at the number of 22-year-old people who can screw up a coffee order, because it's more than 50%. And if you are of the 50% that can just listen to a simple instruction, take it seriously because it matters to the person you're doing this little thing for, and do it right, then, deliver mail to the right person. There are people who screw that up. And if you don't screw it up and you form a little bit of a personal relationship, you get trusted with bigger and bigger tasks. And that's, you work your way up. And if you want to be a creative type, then again, there's value at starting an agency. You'll find a class of like-minded people. And if you want to act, I assure you there are other mailroom kids who want to be actors and actresses as well. And if you find each other and can build something small and do a little reel together and help each other out on their projects, and one of it gets seen, and somebody gets a project and they hear about a small opening, it's just all the networking. So, you just got to start small. And, rarely are people plucked off the street or, cast in a blockbuster from an open casting call. I mean, yeah, it does happen, and read the newspapers and casting notices for those opportunities too. But, don't be afraid to take small things, and don't be afraid to walk away from small things that don't, no longer hold.
I think that is such an important distinction to make about, folks who come to agencies. You can come to an agency knowing that you want to be a writer or a director or work in development, and use that as your stepping stone to get there. That is so true. And I have experienced that. A lot of my close friends who started off in my class have since left, and they came in, they're like, hey, I know I want to direct. I know I don't want to be an agent, but I'm going to use this 1 year as an agency to learn about directors, how to become a great director, and to meet people that can help launch my career as a director. So that is a really important thing to keep in mind about agencies.
And I represent, when I was an assistant, I represent people who were assistants with me at the company, at other companies. I pitch to senior vice presidents. I've been delivered, it's all building relationships that start when you're starting. So yeah.
100%. So important.
Eliza, I just want to make one thing. When you're interviewing though, do not say you want to be a writer or a director or a producer. You want to be an agent, like 100%. That's all you want to do. You don't want to do anything else. You live, eat, breathe agent.
Yeah.
Do not say you want to be a writer or director, because we get thousands of submissions, and this is the easiest way to screen somebody and just cross them off the list. Never say that.
Yeah, that's a very important piece of
little for saying that. As someone who actually wanted to be an agent, I wanted to club every kid in there saying that was their dream, because it made me sound like I was artificial. It drove me nuts. I'd sit there at UTA, actually. I interviewed and I sat there on the bench, and this girl's like, I want to be a writer, but I'm going to say I want to be an agent. And I was like, no, I want to be an agent. You want to be a writer. Right. That's what agencies want to hear. They want loyalty to the company. They want to know you're not just going to get up and leave in a year, even though most people do. And so he's not leading you astray, but it does pain me to hear. I think what Ryan's really touching on is, it's a hard job. As Francis said earlier, it can be a boxing match, but something that none of us have really said explicitly is you're a team with your other assistants. Sort of the grad school analogy folds in, where all the other assistants are either fresh out of college or in their 20s and their early 30s, and we're all working together and there for one another. And we're reading each other's scripts as well as our clients, and we're giving notes. I brought a girl who used to work as an assistant with me and is now at a production company script, and the agent I work for just signed her. Two of my friends in my department, they did their years, they got up and left. They're repped by the agents they used to work for. So you can definitely do it that way. I'd say be careful with when timing is really big in this industry. We had a kid come in my mailroom class. He wanted to be an actor. He read all the pilots for pilot season, memorized all the parts, quit, went on auditions, and burned every bridge he had. So I think you're better off playing the long game. That goes for applying too. I know you want to get your resume in there right now, but since we're in a hiring freeze, I know Gersh specifically is doing general interviews, and then they put you in the backlog, and maybe you're not at the front of their mind when they are hiring. So just timing is a really important element to that. And then if you don't want to go to an agency and you really just want to be heard and you're a writer, script contests. Submit your scripts. There are so many different contests and pitch festivals and things. I know Gersh sends me out to 3 pitch festivals a year to hear scripts, and if I'm interested, I'll read them and bring them to the team. So if you really don't want to go the agency route, it's easier to do it the agency route, but there are thousands. Hollywood, Up has one. Which one did I just did one whose name is escaping me, but there are tons of pitch festivals, tons of script contests that are posted, and we're watching those to see up and coming writers as well.
And then one last question from the audience. In terms of genre right now, what types of script pitches are you seeing have the most success? Is it horror? Is it comedy? Are the rom-coms coming back? I'd love to understand, for those of you who work directly with scripts and content, what genres are popping right now.
Animation. COVID right now, we are pitching so much animation, it's insane. I have a script we've been pitching for over a year that we just turned into animation to give it a better edge. Because obviously
it doesn't require physical on-site shooting right now.
Exactly. So it's because COVID won't slow it down. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, I remember the writer's strike like no other. There was no new Ugly Betty for weeks. There was just a dearth of television. And I think we're trying to avoid that. And so everyone's trying to pull animation. I guess that's not quite the topical genre, but as far as the scripts coming across my desk, we're seeing which ones we can flip to animation, which ones we can sort of COVID film and things like that. Because writers are still writing, but there's going to come a point where nothing's getting made.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a COVID-friendly, low-impact production model is helpful. Generally most buyers are looking for the future with, big ideas still. So I think it's probably hard to sell a show that requires a lot of international travel at this point. But if you can kind of contain an environment to some degree, unscripted business, there are a lot of, like, The Circle is a great example. It's a social experiment. It's self-contained in its own environment, and there's a little bit of timelessness to it. It's using kind of the idea of social media and how you present yourself versus yourself in real life. Kind of that, that's a topic that has come up a lot in news articles or whatever, and so I think it's timely in that, and so things that feel of the moment are more relevant than others. Handmaid's Tale did so well for Hulu when it launched because of the kind of the feeling of where the government in the U.S. was going at that time. So it's those things that have, that might have been a little bit of a lucky timing thing, to be honest, but those things that touch upon greater themes generally find an audience quicker than those that don't.
Yeah, I think rather than trying to sort of pinpoint a specific genre, I find what people are really responding to in the marketplace right now are authentic voices. And I think there has been such change in our society over the last few years, and you think about Me Too and Black Lives Matter, and those types of sort of blanket term that we hear a lot is diverse, which is potentially problematic just as a label, but I think if you can write from your own experience, and if you can really find what's unique and authentic to you and the life you've lived and the experience you've lived and how to express that in a story, I think that's what people are really responding to more than, trying to sort of pull an idea about a genre out of your head. Just write what feels true to you. That's my advice.
Awesome. Well, guys, we are 1 minute over, and I know everyone has very busy schedules and probably has a Zoom that you're 1 minute late for. So thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
And thank you to all of our panelists for talking to our students today. And thank you for everyone who attended our last GEMA View. So I wish everyone a great rest of your week and a healthy weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Hey, you have a good day.